The billionaire CEO laughed when she saw the poor janitor standing alone in the middle of her company's marble lobby, holding a broken mop in one hand and an old canvas bag in the other. She had no idea that the man she was mocking had just been appointed the new CEO of the company she believed belonged entirely to her. By the end of that day, the woman who had judged him by his uniform would be forced to face a truth that would change the way she looked at people forever. If you believe kindness can give someone a second chance, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to SoulTales for more emotional stories about kindness, courage, and unexpected second chances. Because sometimes, the person standing at the bottom of the ladder is actually the one who knows what it takes to climb it. Ethan Carter had spent the last 3 months working as a janitor at Sterling Horizon Group, one of the most powerful companies in the city. Every morning, he arrived before sunrise, quietly cleaned the marble floors, emptied office trash cans, wiped fingerprints from glass doors, and disappeared before most executives even noticed him. His uniform was faded, his shoes were worn, and the old canvas bag he carried had been repaired so many times that the stitching was almost impossible to recognize. To most employees, Ethan was invisible. But there was something they did not know. Ethan had not taken the job because he had no education or ambition. He had taken it because he wanted to understand the company from the bottom before stepping into the highest position inside it. Years earlier, Ethan had founded a small technology company with his closest friend. They had built it from nothing, working in a tiny apartment and sleeping beside computers because they could not afford an office. Their company eventually became successful, but Ethan's partner betrayed him, secretly selling critical assets and leaving Ethan with enormous debt. Ethan lost almost everything, including the home where he had raised his young daughter, Lily, with his late wife's parents. Instead of blaming everyone around him, Ethan started over. He learned how to rebuild quietly. Eventually, a private investment group discovered his work, and Ethan became the majority shareholder of Sterling Horizon Group after a complicated acquisition. But before officially taking control, he made one unusual decision. He wanted to spend several months inside the company anonymously, working among the people executives rarely noticed. The company's billionaire heiress and acting CEO, Victoria Sterling, had grown up surrounded by wealth, luxury, and people who constantly told her how extraordinary she was. At 34, she was intelligent, ambitious, and feared throughout the corporate world. Her success was real, but so was her arrogance. She measured people by their clothes, their titles, their cars, and the offices they occupied. She rarely spoke to cleaners, drivers, assistants, or cafeteria workers unless something had gone wrong. To Victoria, status was proof of value. One rainy Monday morning, Victoria entered the lobby in a tailored black suit while a group of executives followed behind her. The floor had just been cleaned, but a delivery worker accidentally spilled coffee near the entrance. Ethan immediately rushed over with his mop. Victoria stopped, looked at his worn uniform, and then glanced at the executive standing behind her. She laughed softly and made a mocking remark about how the company was apparently hiring anyone these days. Several executives laughed because they were afraid not to. Ethan lowered his eyes, cleaned the coffee, and said nothing. But Victoria wasn't finished. She noticed his old canvas bag sitting beside the janitor's cart and joked that even the janitor's bag looked like it belonged in a museum. Ethan simply picked it up and continued working. What Victoria didn't see was the small photograph inside that bag, showing Ethan with Lily on her first day of school. It was the photograph Ethan looked at whenever the world reminded him of everything he had lost. Later that afternoon, Ethan discovered something disturbing. Several employees had been secretly overworked, and some low-level workers had been threatened with termination whenever they complained. He also discovered that a senior executive had been manipulating financial reports to hide massive losses. Ethan quietly documented everything. He didn't expose anyone immediately because he wanted to understand how deep the problem went. The company looked perfect from the outside, but underneath the polished floors were frightened employees and decisions being made for personal profit rather than the company's future. One evening, Ethan found an elderly maintenance worker named Samuel sitting alone in the basement, holding a termination notice. Samuel had worked for Sterling Horizon for 22 years, but a manager planned to fire him because he had complained about unsafe equipment. Ethan sat beside him instead of walking away. Samuel told Ethan that he had a sick wife and could not afford to lose his insurance. Ethan listened carefully, then promised him that things would change. Samuel smiled sadly because he thought the janitor was simply trying to comfort him. The next morning, Victoria announced an emergency executive meeting. The board had received reports that the company's financial position was worse than expected. Investors were losing confidence, and someone inside the company appeared to be leaking sensitive information. Victoria was furious. She demanded answers from every department, but no one had them. What she didn't know was that the person quietly collecting the evidence was the same janitor she had laughed at. That evening, Ethan received a message confirming that the final legal documents had been completed. He was no longer simply the anonymous majority shareholder. The following morning, he would officially become the new CEO of Sterling Horizon Group. The next day, the entire executive floor was filled with nervous employees. Victoria stood beside the boardroom table, preparing for the announcement of a new corporate leadership structure. She expected an experienced businessman from outside the company to walk through the doors. Instead, the elevator opened and Ethan stepped out wearing a simple dark suit. No janitor uniform. No mop. No old shoes. Just the same calm face she had mocked days earlier. Victoria froze. The chairman of the board stood up and welcomed Ethan Carter as the new majority owner and CEO of Sterling Horizon Group. The room became completely silent. Victoria looked from Ethan to the chairman, then back at Ethan. Her face slowly lost its confidence as she remembered every word she had said to him. Ethan did not humiliate her. He didn't raise his voice or remind everyone how she had treated him. Instead, he walked to the head of the table and placed a folder in front of the board. Inside were the financial records, evidence of corruption, employee complaints, and proof of the executives who had been exploiting the company. The people responsible were removed, and the employees who had been threatened were protected. Then Ethan did something nobody expected. He announced that Samuel and several other long-term workers would receive improved benefits and protection under a new employee welfare program. He said the company would no longer measure a person's worth by their position, clothing, or salary. He explained that during his months as a janitor, he had learned more about the heart of the company than he could have learned from any executive report. Victoria sat quietly, overwhelmed by shame. She approached Ethan after the meeting and apologized sincerely. For the first time in her life, she admitted that she had confused wealth with worth. Ethan accepted her apology, but he told her that forgiveness was not about forgetting what happened. It was about choosing to become better because of it. Months later, Sterling Horizon became a different company. Victoria began personally visiting departments she had once ignored. She learned the names of cleaners, cafeteria workers, security guards, and assistants. She created scholarships for employees' children and established a fund for workers facing emergencies. Ethan continued walking through the building without demanding special treatment. Sometimes he would still stop by the janitorial department, not because he needed to clean floors, but because he never wanted to forget where he had learned his greatest lesson. One afternoon, Ethan found Victoria standing beside Samuel, helping him carry a box of supplies. She looked at Ethan and smiled. There was no arrogance in her expression anymore. Only humility. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people deserve respect no matter where they come from, and subscribe to SoulTales for more stories that remind us that kindness can change lives. And before we reach the final moment, I want you to leave one special comment. Kindness sees what the eyes cannot. Write it below if you believe someone's job, clothes, or financial status should never decide their worth. Ethan eventually understood that becoming a CEO was not the greatest achievement of his life. The greatest achievement was surviving humiliation without becoming cruel, losing everything without losing his heart, and gaining power without using it to hurt the people who once looked down on him. Victoria learned something even more valuable. A person wearing a janitor's uniform could carry more dignity than someone wearing a $1,000 suit. Because sometimes, life hides greatness behind ordinary clothes. Sometimes the person everyone ignores is carrying a story nobody has bothered to hear. And sometimes, the greatest test of character is not what you do when you have nothing, but how you treat others when you finally have everything.